And they pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gate of Ekron. And the Philistine dead lay along the way to Sharaim, even to Gath and Ekron. So we see that David followed the leading of the Lord, what he believed God was having him to do. Good morning, Ariel. You snuck in on me. And then he chops off the head, that's gruesome, of Goliath, and he's standing there with that head in his hand. And what did it do? It spurred the people on, the men that were there to fight, it spurred them on to react because of his obedience. And our obedience oftentimes makes others, it causes a positive reaction from others because we're doing what we're called to do, what we're supposed to do. And so as I was reading about the story and just meditating on it, I thought, at no point in the story when David was facing Goliath did David say in the process that got him on that battlefield to face Goliath, not one time did he say, well, God told me this, or God told me that. You ever notice that? You notice that he followed the leading of the Lord. He was challenged on, it seemed like on every front almost. Now you take a bunch of battled, tested men, and you walk a 15-year-old in the midst of them, and he don't even have armor on. You say it again. you could do this. You can handle him. His relationship with God set the stage for how he could react when the moment arrived in his life. We have these moments that come sometimes, and we don't exactly plan for them. They just come. But it's our daily walk and daily relationship with the Lord that puts us in a position so that we have our relationship is borne out in the midst of the crisis or the time of the trial when it hits us. And as you're reading the story, this whole story as it's coming up, he spoke up in the midst of his brothers. He let them weigh out what he was saying. He got rebuffed for it. And sometimes when you do the will of the Lord, it's not easy, is it? Sometimes you get rebuffed. He was challenged for his stance, for his views. He didn't, how would you say, he wasn't disrespectful in any way. He waited for the opportunity to come, and in time it was granted. So he didn't force his hand. And at no time did he say, God told me this, I should get to do that. How many of you have ever had somebody that was stuck on, let me put it this way. He stood his ground, but he had respect for those that were over him, allowing them to process what he was saying. And then it came time, as time goes on, as the word's being spread around, for him to be able to respond and put in position. I just find there's a lot of things, the lessons that we could learn about this whole thing if we reflect in light of how we know the Lord works and how we've experienced the Lord working and how the process got him from point A to point B. So those are just some things that stood out in my mind.
That's really good, Will. I appreciate you saying that because I've often thought about how his brothers sneered at him, and the people that's close to you sometimes can hurt you a lot worse than people that have no connection to you.
Yeah.
How he overcome that, his mind was stayed on God, had to be. but his brothers, you know, he was kind of, you know, what are you doing here, you little twerp?
Yeah.
God always has a way.
Yeah.
Always has a way.
And he puts us in a position sometimes. I remember sitting over at headquarters several years ago when I was doing my dissertation, and I was asked to come as being a consultant based on what my dissertation was. And there's a room full of state overseers and some pastors, and Brother Mark Williams was chairing the meeting. And we were looking at redoing the minister's reporting. And my dissertation changed that designation, whereas Keith, you report, you remember years ago it used to be just 4 different categories. My dissertation changed it to all those other categories, and which I thank the Lord, I had a lot of help with that. People helped me develop that list, and it came to me. It came one time during the meeting to make a comment, to speak to it, and my comments had to speak about something I experienced when I was pastoring, which was I wasn't allowed to report, and that's the way the church system was or is, and nothing's perfect, okay? So we worked through it. When I got to the Pine Tops Church, when I got there was people on the roll that wasn't supposed to be on the roll, that were dead, had moved on, hadn't come back. And so I started taking names off. Well, guess what? You get a phone call from the state overseer when you do that. And he said, you can't do, what are you doing down there? And I said, well, there's some that were dead on the roll. I don't think they need to stay on there. He said, no, don't go ahead and take them off. And I said, well, we have. And I said, then there's some that hadn't been here in a long time that the local people here have advised me of who's coming, who's not. So let's take them off. So we take them off. And I said, that's what we're going to do. And he said, well, you can't do it that way moving forward. And I said, okay, how do we do it? He said, you've got to, for everyone that's not coming, you got to send them a letter, because there had been people that had litigated against churches for taking them off and not being notified. So there was a legal thing that was part of it. Okay, that makes sense there. Then, and if they don't give you the authority their authority, written consent to take you off, you got to leave them on. Okay, all righty. And then for every person that comes in, the ones you find you can take off, when you get a new member in, then you can take one of those off. And I said, well, you'll never see the progress, the work that I'm doing, because I'm righting the ship. And so he said, well, that's just the way it is. And I said, well, what about the people that are here that are faithful, that are paying my salary? They're being taxed for people that aren't here. I said, I don't think that's right. And he said, well, but you're the overseer and I'm going to do what you say. So I did. What I did in-house, now I'm still getting back to the meeting we had over there. What I did in-house, I created an active role and an inactive role. Because the bulk of the number, we had like 125 something membership plus like that at the time, maybe more than that. And my pay was based on the numbers that were in the membership role. Well, if I had 50 people coming, then they're paying me on 125, which that means they're taxing the people for people that aren't there. So I created an active role and an inactive role in-house. And I took my pay off of the ones that were coming and paying tithe, which seemed like to be the right thing to do. Well, I spoke that over there in that meeting. State overseer in front of me, I could see his head shaking like this because I had that conversation. Now, I had talked to, at the time, Dr. Culpepper was the state general overseer, and I told him the same thing. And I asked him, of course, now I asked him when I talked to him, I said, brother, Culpepper, will you allow me to speak freely? And I said, and here's the conviction of my heart. If I'm getting paid on a lie, then that means the state overseer is getting paid on a lie. And if the state overseer is getting paid on a lie, then that means you're getting paid on a lie. I said that same thing in that meeting over there, and that overseer in front of me was shaking his head. And I had one brother, a pastor, clean all the other side of the room. He goes, amen to that.
Yeah.
And so he was on board with me. If I mentioned his name, you'd know him. You'd know him. He evangelized his son, but I think he's a state overseer right now. But anyhow, it's something I felt led to do and to say, and it felt like the right thing to do. And some were okay with it, and others were not okay with it. To Dr. Culpepper's credit, not long after that, they ran a 17-point thing that they did they published it in the Evangel, and they notified all the pastors about different things they was going to do, and one of them was to clean the rolls in your state. And so, hats off to Brother Culpepper. And so, and I don't know how many others did it, but I learned of 2 states that did do it, that did do something about it at the time. And one of them was a good friend of mine. He and I had not had a conversation at all about any of this, and he acted on it in his state. And so anyway, you speak up when the time's right, and it's not always well received. And so I could relate to David to some degree. I'm glad that I felt like I was facing a giant. But it was, yes ma'am. Now I will say to this end, I have not been invited back to any of the meetings. So
maybe your work there is done.
Yeah. And I did pitch the idea about the active role and the inactive role. Dr. Culpepper asked me could my dissertation address that, and I said no, it's outside the scope of that. However, this is my opinion, and he took it to heart. He listened to it, and he said, well, if you could do something further on that, he said, we would entertain it. And I never did get to do that. And now leadership has changed, and so I think that. Now, Brother Mark Williams, I will say to his credit, I sent out probably 13 letters to men that I knew that were state overseers personally. I got no responses from any of them on my survey. That informs your research. I think you're familiar with that. Yeah. And so Mark Williams, when he learned about it, he invited me to his office. We sat down, and he said, bring the letter to me. I'll send it out on my letterhead. Wow. That was a big deal. Wow. He sent it out, and I got about right at 90% response from men I didn't even send it to start with. It came back. I have one of the highest responses on a survey that you do for your dissertation. Buddy, you know, you've probably done this stuff too. I don't know if you use SurveyMonkey in your dissertation or anything like that. But anyhow, Mark Williams was a tremendous help in the success of that. And it was because of that, what happened is that Mark invited me to consult. Brother Williams invited me to come and be a part of that committee. So hats off to those men that were a part, that listened.
The sad thing is, a state overseer gets paid by membership. Mm-hmm. And that's the sad part. You can't clean something up if the head of the house doesn't want it cleaned up. I can spend all day cleaning my house, or somebody clean my house. If I don't want them in there, they're not going to come in. They're not going to do their works. And sometimes that, Lord, I'm not saying this. Don't need to get back to my office.
Now, when they did change the reporting system, they did change it based on the research I had submitted, and we tweaked it a little bit.
Is that the part where, you put the numbers against what you are?
That's correct.
Well, believe me, we have more general overseers than the 5 we got.
Julian Robinson was a tremendous help.
Yeah,
He was a tremendous help too, because I consulted him for his input on how all that would work. And when we got back after the assembly and all this stuff was kicking in, I said, Julian, can I come over there and survey your people? I said, I got some gift cards. I want to give them a gift card and talk to them a little bit. And he said, oh, no, don't you come over here. These people hate you.
it's,
They don't know who done this, but they will skin you alive.
it's a trial,
Yeah.
because in this church, we have assistant pastor,
Mhm.
we have, the lead pastor, assistant pastor, this pastor, this pastor, this pastor. And some of those context codes don't agree with any of those.
Correct.
Now,
Well, see, back then, I don't mean to be going too far out on this whole idea, because we're talking about David here, is that years ago, when Keith and I were doing this reporting, and Buddy, I don't know if anybody else reports to the church here at large, you only had 4 choices: evangelist, pastor, denominational, and other.
we got a lot of others.
Yes, you do. And when I talked to Brother Sibley, Wallace Sibley, he said he was down in, I think it was in the Bahamas, or maybe it was Jamaica somewhere. And he said we had this one brother that was reporting in that he had 60-something people getting saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost every month. And he said, there's not that many people down there. How is he doing this? And so they called the guy in, or he went to visit him one. He said, brother, he said, you are reporting wrong. He said, where are these 60? Your church ought to be busting out the seams. He said, brother, if I can keep them from month to month, I'm going to claim them from month to month. That's what he was doing in his reporting. And so that, of course, they helped him in a better way to do that kind of thing. The whole idea behind it was, whenever I stepped out of pastoring, I had a selection, and as a pastor, and I went to other. Other was about as demeaning of a title as far as identity was concerned for me. I didn't realize that until I became another. And
You could have become a, what is it, in transit? I think now there's a number for in transit, meaning you're in between here, trying to figure out where you're gonna go here. So you're no longer another.
Did you say other or other?
Between
I became utter. Oh, well, no, I didn't know utter at that time, so I became other.
You're going to.
Yeah.
We get another character.
There you go.
We've missed you, Nick.
Well, the other part was had to do with an identity. Had to do with ministers deal a lot with their identity. Regardless of where you work, you meet somebody you never met before, and what do you tell them? What do you do? You tell them your job. That's your identity. And so whenever you are pastoring or evangelist, you're maybe you're just a chaplain, or you're whatever. You need to be properly identified or have that identity. And so it's no fault of the church, it's just the way it is. The church has always seen from the very beginning, when you became an exhorter, everybody was an evangelist. That's your first step when you're licensure, is an exhorter. And that's the reason evangelism was the first selection back then that you could choose from. That was explained to me from Wallace Sibley was the one actually that told me that. And And so then you move on, if you get a position, now when it came down to other, you could write in state youth director, music minister, whatever, you could write that in. My point was to take away other because can have a negative connotation to it. Not always, but it can have a negative part to where you feel like you have an identity when you're able to put that into the thing. Now, the list is not exhaustive. It's not. That thing could run on forever if it was to identify. We create more positions than you can shake a stick at in our churches and in our roles. And so, but the idea was to capture that. The other part that I hoped to get pushed through, which it did not, was to have a primary and a secondary. Do you realize that probably 75% or more, probably 80% of our ministers who are out there have 2 jobs? I don't know how many churches are in the United States, but back then we had probably 6,500 Church of God established churches in the United States. You know how many ministers there are currently active that could pastor? Way over that number.
12,000.
How many?
Over 12,000.
Over 12,000. Okay.
And you've only got a little over 6,000 churches. But yet, it is hard to find somebody to pastor those churches.
That's correct. So you take that number, okay, how many churches are pastoring at least, how many pastors are pastoring a church that has at least 100?
Used to know that figure, I haven't had to pull it up lately.
Okay.
I got a feeling with assembly coming, it's,
To get a church running 150, anything over 100 is rare compared to the number of people that we have that are licensed, that are in the United States that can fill those roles. But that's not the only role that can be filled, that should be filled. So I wanted to have a primary and a secondary, and they felt like at the time that was not germane to what they were trying to do, and that's okay. The point is that I wanted conversation. I wanted to have a conversation because a minister is challenged constantly. David, when we think about David, do you think his identity was possibly challenged? He identified as a person who God was using, and he was speaking up. And so his identity is being challenged. To challenge him is almost saying you didn't hear from God.
but yet they all knew that he had been called by God.
His brothers
His
did.
brothers did.
Yeah, the 3 that were there knew. You're correct. That's a good point.
But they weren't really agreeing with it.
No,
Not at all.
They didn't think he could do anything but take care of sheep.
Yeah.
And
So
the
they went
problem
there,
was, he was taking care
Pretty naive.
of the sheep,
Do what?
the whole
Nah,
army.
he was naive. I mean, at
Yeah.
that age, that might have what made him such able to do that, because he didn't know any better, you know?
What the real rub here was, he was willing to follow God, the rest of them weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his desire to follow God and to allow the Lord to use him was challenged greatly. His identity was challenged.
Being naive sometimes is what you need to be.
Doesn't Jesus say, talking about when he had the little child to come to him,
Yeah,
having that kind of faith, that kind of relationship with the Lord, to where you are naive?
unless you become as a little child.
Yeah.
But he was sold out, though. He was focused and sold out on God, and that's why he did what he did.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a story about?
You're in the right place. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Tell
gonna
us
go
the
down a
story.
different rabbit trail, okay?
Okay, go for it.
Steve and I, this had been about 20 years ago, we were in a lawsuit. Didn't know, it was about 4.5-year lawsuit over a piece of property. Well, it come down that Steve and I were going to go to the appellate court in Knoxville. And something laid upon my heart, because we were facing a giant. And I'm just gonna give y'all an example of a giant that we all face some form of a giant, and that was a giant to Steve and I. I went and got some leather, some shoestring, and I made a leather pouch. I told Steve, something told me to get 5 smooth stones, and I said, where am I gonna get them at? And we were lo and behold at a job, and I picked up 5 smooth stones. Well, at the time, we had a men's prayer group up here on Tuesday, and I had them to pray over, told we was going to the appellate court. Well, we was in our attorney, we had our attorney there, but then you had to have an attorney for the appellate court to represent you. And in his office, I laid them down, them stones and that thing, and we prayed over it. And when we went into that the judge would be a judge, that he would be a good judge, he'd be on his game, that he would be fair about what he did, and the lawyer and the other team would not be on their game. I've never seen, and I'm thankful because this had to be God and everybody else, that when the opposing attorney, he couldn't even say his name hardly. He would take, and he had his, their legal pad that they got to go through, and he would ask a question. And the judge said, I told you, we've already discussed that. We're not going to go that way. And he'd ask another question, and it'd be the same response. And so it was embarrassing. I thought the other lawyer, he had to be embarrassed. And so they dismissed. And we came back in a quick and speedy, it was just a little bit after lunchtime, and he awarded in our favor of all this. But the reason I'm saying that, if you've got a giant, God is able to do it if we lay it before.
Yeah.
If we lay it before. But I mean, it was everything answered. But like I said, I got that sling and the 5 smooth stones, and we carried it to the court.
Thank you, Rick. That's good.
Wonderful.
That's a good place to transition right there. That was really good. I appreciate you sharing that. Prayer request. We prayed at the beginning for Harry and others.
Steve's blood pressure, it'd be regular.